Venerable Robina Courtin has worked full-time for Lama Tropchen Yeshe and Lama Zopa Rinpoche's organization, the Foundation for the Preservation of Mahayana Tradition, since her ordination in the late 1970s. Over the years, she has served as the editorial director of Wisdom Publications, editor of Mandala Magazine, executive director of Liberation Prison Project, and as a touring teacher of Buddhism. Her life and work with prisoners have been featured in the documentary films Chasing Buddha and Key to Freedom. Venerable Robina is known for her straightforward and energetic teaching style, helping people discover the potential of their own minds with clear explanations about Tibetan Buddhism and how to apply it to their lives. Visit her website www.robinacourtin.com.
Okay, fear. Okay. Before we start, we can do our little motivation, as the Tibetans would say, or we might say, state our purpose. That's what it really means by motivation. You know, sort of like, what are you here for? Where are you going? What's the purpose? What's the goal? So I suppose we can say, we make it an altruistic one and say, we're here to listen, think about, and that's including me, these ideas coming from the Buddha about the mind, about life, about how to live our lives, bare minimum without going completely crazy, at least to navigate the craziness with steady mind, at least this, if not more. So we can, for our benefit, but also because we live in this crazy planet with others, for their benefit as well. And long-term benefit, long-term purpose, the altruistic one of bodhicitta. So this can be a cause, one of the causes for us to become enlightened, which is what Buddha says we can all become, a fully developed person. So we really then can be of benefit to others. Thinking like that, we can sing our little prayer in Tibetan, that sort of the second two lines of which express that. The first two lines express our reliance on the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha, for those of us who kind of figure we're Buddhists already. Sangye chadam soke chognam la, jangchu badu dagni kyab suchi, dagi chonyen gipe sonam ki, drola penchir sangye drumpa shok. Sangye chadam soke chognam la, jangchu badu dagni kyab suchi, dagi chonyen gipe sonam ki, drola penchir sangye drumpa shok. Sangye chadam soke chognam la, jangchu badu dagni kyab suchi, dagi chonyen gipe sonam ki, drola penchir sangye drumpa shok. So if you read any Buddhist literature, you're going to occasionally hear the phrase, the fears of samsara, you know, the fears of samsara. So I suppose that's a bit quaint, because we don't quite kind of relate to, we're vaguely not sure about samsara. Usually we think of samsara where you sort of have sex and drugs and rock and roll, and you're supposed to give it up for boring old nirvana where you have to be holy, you know, so it's a bit, it sounds kind of boring. But actually, it's just a Buddhist way of saying being an ordinary person. And that, what that means is an ordinary person in samsara, quote unquote, is a person who's caught up with ego grasping, attachment, anger, and they are the fears of samsara. So what's utterly fascinating, and when we hear it, we kind of don't join the dots because it's not in our psychology, it's not in our neuroscience, we don't posit such things. They say when we really begin to become advanced, you know, and finally when we've realized emptiness, we have cut fear. So let's analyze that, the logic of it psychologically, because this is exactly the point in Buddhism, you know. Buddha's saying that the main cause of our suffering is, in fact, these unhappy states of mind in us, you know, these neuroses, these, I think would have liked that phrase, these afflictions, as they call them, mental afflictions, these delusional states of mind, these misconceptions, these wrong views, whatever words you like, all these unhappy states of mind, as well as a series of other misconceptions that Buddha would assert are in fact misconceptions. This is a very surprising concept. He says these are why we suffer. These are why we suffer. And the reason is because they're not in touch with reality. They cause us to not be in touch with reality. And therein is the root of fear. So typically they talk about the root delusion, the primordial grasping at an intrinsic me. You know, this primordial ignorance, marigpa they call it, this primordial ignorance, deep in the bones of all beings, so deep, so primordial, so instinctive that we don't even have a name for it, you know. this primordial instinctive grasping at a very concrete, solid sense of a separate, bereft, unhappy me. I mean, deep in our bones, this is an assumption. And it's so subtle and so absolute, so utter, that in normal psychology, we just take it as a given, you know. So they always talk about that one being rooted in fear. And that one arises, like, it's there all the time, underpinning attachment and all the others. But it's like a sleeping lion most of the time. And when you feel that one so profoundly is when you're shocked, you nearly have a car accident, someone harms you, you're held up by a gun, when literally you have a serious panic attack. We know that's what's called fear. But these days, you think about it, everybody's having panic attacks. Everyone's living in fear. We won't call it that. We call it anxiety, panic attacks, you know, heart beating fast, thinking you're going to die. It's the commonest thing. Well, anxiety is just mild fear, that's all. So, and the fact is that from the Buddhist perspective, this ego grasping, this root delusion, which you do cut when you realize emptiness, and then you have cut fears, it's just hard to kind of conceptualize, because we can't imagine a life where you're not worried and have dramas and up and down like a yo-yo. This is normal reality for most of us. Even if life is fairly good, bad things happen, you know. So this is where we have to if we want to understand this idea of fear, we have to understand what he means by these states of mind and the reason why they are rooted in fear, you know, and that we are living in fear, basically. So on the face of it, if our life is going fairly well, which in Buddhist terms means attachment's getting what it wants, you know, nice partners, life is good, you have a job, you have a house, you go home every day, the house is still there, you know, not like in Los Angeles where suddenly your house is no longer there, or your husband's left for a younger version, or the country's upside down. It happens every day in people's lives. If, you know, we have reasonable happiness, reasonable kind of consistency in things happening, but we see our mind's never happy, our mind's never really stable. We're up and down, we're worried, and it can be a fairly quiet level. But when things stop being good, that's when it comes to the surface. That's when it's naked, isn't it, you know? So this idea of fear is so surprising to us. But if you look at attachment, which is this primordial emotional hunger, the main voice of this ego grasping, the root delusion, this emotional hunger, first this dissatisfaction that never feels that I've got enough, never feels I am enough, so it's always hankering after something. And then, you know, and then, therefore the emotional hunger, and then the manipulation to get it, and then the anticipation of getting it, and indeed some pleasure when you do get it, which kind of throws us, but then the disappointment and the despair when things go wrong, when the bubble bursts, when he leaves you for a younger version, when you break your leg, when you get cancer, when whatever happens unexpectedly, that's when the panic arises. And so the thing is, anger, for example, anger is very surprising to us. Okay, if we think of having a person's having a panic attack, you can see them shouting, their eyes are wide, and we say, oh, the poor thing's having a panic attack. You know, your heart's beating fast. A friend of mine recently started having a panic attack. She thought she was dying. She went to ER, and she keeps calling up 911 because she's having her heart go so fast, you know, and she's having a panic attack. But if you look at a person who's angry, if you didn't hear their words, you just saw the behavior, saw them shouting and arms flailing and spit coming out of their mouth, their eyes wide in horror, you'd go, wow, that person's having a panic attack. When in reality they are. But we just, oh, they're angry, look at them, you know. But analyze the behavior, look at it, they're completely in a state of shock. And that's actually what anger is. Anger is this completely freaked out panic because your attachment didn't get what it wanted. So as long as we keep getting what we want, we can kind of allay the fears. We can hold them back, you know. But of course, if from the Buddhist perspective, if we're not dealing with our minds, which we mostly don't, it's going to come out one time. I mean, this friend of mine recently, who's been this steady, easygoing lady all her life, she's 60-something, you know, has problems, has dramas, but is always managed, very low key. And now she's having serious panic attacks. Things have come to the surface, you know. So the thing I'm trying to get at is that having ego grasping, having attachment, having anger, having the normal, ordinary states of mind that we in our psychological models and we in neuroscience consider totally normal parts of a normal person. And we give them equal status along with the good qualities which don't cause panic, like kindness and love and compassion and generosity and forgiveness. They're hard work, but they're virtuous states of mind. And they are not rooted in fear, you know. It's kind of really interesting analysis. We don't think this way at all. So we're all living in fear to one degree or another, but we call it anxiety, worry, upset, fearful. You know, we mightn't say fear, But anxiety is fear. It's mild fear. And what is it fear of? Well, fear that the things you're attached to won't happen, or fear that the things that you don't want will happen. Living in the past, worrying about the future. We all are like this. This is just not, this is what Buddha means by being in samsara. But because it's normal for us, and in our culture it's considered normal, of course, if it's more serious, then you creep off embarrassedly, guiltily to your therapist when it's a bit late, when the wheels have fallen off. But mostly, most people, rich or poor, fat or thin, old or young, unless they're very special, are going to be like this. And that's what Buddha means by living in the fears of samsara. So the assumption, so then we think, well, if that's normal, that sounds a bit depressing, but that's what he's saying. And why for him he's saying that's being in samsara is because he simply found a method to cut all that stuff. And now that's extreme. That's radical. That really is radical. I mean, you read about bodhicitta, you read these outrageous levels of compassion that the Buddhist view would say we are capable of accomplishing, and these amazing beings you read about, you read the histories of people, you read the biographies of these amazing beings. I mean, they're basically what we'd call in the Christian world, we call them saints. And I mean, you don't go, oh, I'd love to be a saint. Where's the university course? They're kind of born unusual. They're just like saints. They're special. Well, that's what bodhisattvas are. But and you look at their behavior, how they are in ordinary circumstances, they're not normal. They are not normal because they don't have attachment. They don't have anger. They don't have jealousy. They don't have fears. And this is the thing that's quite hard for us to hear, because we don't posit such possibilities in our psychology, that we can learn to not have fears. That means we can be courageous, we can be compassionate and wise, and the interesting thing is, therefore, be extremely happy. So when you think of a bodhisattva who's got incredible compassion, we usually think of compassion as something really sad. How could you be possibly happy in the face of suffering? Well, this is what's fascinating. From the Buddhist perspective, the virtuous states of mind, love and compassion, kindness, they don't cause suffering. They can't be causing suffering. They're not possible. It's only attachment and anger and jealousy and the others that cause suffering. So the Buddhist approach is, as you're progressing on your path, starting at the very beginning, your first level of practice, would be to control the servants of your attachment and anger and jealousy and fears, and not kill and steal and punch and jump on 14 boys or whatever, or go crazy or kill yourself or others. You calm down your behavior, very first level of practice. And already that's helping us subdue our mind, because we're becoming familiar with it. We're harnessing the energy of the servants of the mind, the body and speech. Then you start to be your own therapist, as Namayashi puts it, and you start to look into your mind. You have a meditation practice, and you not just do a bit of mindfulness, but you become super intelligent, super aware of the workings of your mind in a really kind of proactive way, where you learn to hear all the conceptual stories, the misconceptions that inform all the emotions, and you learn to be able to unpack them and unravel them and change them. I mean, Buddha's your best cognitive behavioral therapist you're going to find, truly and really. Or, our neuroscientists, the greatest finding of the 20th century, as one scientist said, which is discovering that we can actually change our brain. And how do you do it? By changing your thoughts, So this is Buddha's deal. This is his expertise. This is his simple point that Buddha's making, that our mind is phenomenally capable of changing. So we have to learn to do that, Why? Because that's what lessens fear, lessens neuroses, lessens suffering, and increases our virtues. And the bonus, increases our joy and contentment and fulfillment. This is the Buddhist approach, It's kind of interesting. We don't think like this, I don't think, in our culture. But to see that, so then we say, well, what are we afraid of? That's the first question we ask. Well, of course we ask that. So if you're nearly attacked or run over by a car or a gunman or something, then we can see it is, isn't it, that the sleeping lion called this sense of I is completely attacked, and it rises to the surface. Well, that's again what panic attacks are. Anxiety, extreme anxiety is that. So this is when we understand psychologically the Buddhist model, that attachment and all the others are the voices of this root sense of I. As I said, if things are going well, we're kind of relaxed, fairly relaxed, we can be comfortable. The house is there, the hubby is there, the job is there, the money's nice, the food is nice, things are going well. So it's sort of under control, but it's right on the surface. It doesn't take long to arise if you haven't worked on your mind. you know. And then when something serious happens, of course, the heart beats fast. You're completely having a panic attack. This is normal, absolutely. But the Buddhist analysis, why it arises, is because we have these neuroses in the mind. And his expertise is the methodology to lessen and eventually remove them. So it's a gradual process. So you could argue you don't just wait till you realize emptiness before the fears go. It's a gradual process. As you work on your mind every day, as you identify the attachment and the dramas, you learn to reconfigure your thoughts. And therefore you become literally more stable and therefore more capable of dealing with the dramas that happen when your attachment doesn't get what it wants, which is kind of a fairly brutal way of saying what aversion is, what anger is, what fears, what the normal daily anxiety, worry, frustration, upset, irritated, annoyed, anger. They're all on the spectrum of aversion. And aversion is the response when attachment doesn't get what it wants. This is a way of saying it. It's kind of quite shocking in a sense. It's a revelation when we can see it working like this, So then you'd say then that one of the practices of dealing with our minds every day, if we have got some sense of what this attachment and aversion are, and they're happening 1,000 times a day. So the driving force under all of us, even if we're nice people, even if we're wonderful people, but if we haven't worked that deeply on our minds, we're going to have this emotional hunger for things to be nice. Attachment is this kind of fragile child in us that can only cope with nice things. It's got to have everything to be nice. So when it gets what it wants, you ask for the ice cream, you get the ice cream. The hubby's there every evening. He's kind to you. He treats you nicely. The kids behave. The house is clean. The job is good. The money's in the bank. Things, ordinary life, when things happen, our attachment's kind of relieved. Phew, things are okay. Another day is gone. It's all good. Things are okay. And we tend to then we rest on our laurels and take it for granted. But the moment attachment doesn't get what it wants, and it's going to happen at some point, we never expect the problems because we grasp at things as permanent. We never think there are going to be things that attachment won't like. And the more strongly that happens, your child dying, get cancer, bad things happen, lose your job, whatever, that's when the aversion arises, and that's really is when we start to have what we call panic attacks. That's exactly what it is, because attachment is so fragile. It's the only way to say it. It just can't cope with anything that I don't want. It's very self-centered. I mean, it seems embarrassing to hear this. It's very I-based. It only wants what I want. It only wants what is nice. By definition, nice means what I think is nice, isn't it? So this is for the Buddha. These are the reason why we have problems. With divorces, annoyed, upset with your sister, or you want to kill somebody, or wars, or dramas. These are the states of mind, and they're all rooted in fear. It's fascinating. So let's try and analyze why. It's very curious. So as we know, of course, Buddha talks about we've got countless lifetimes. This is the Buddhist model. So let's take it on board and try to get the idea of why there's so much fear, why we have anxiety, why these states of mind are rooted in fear. The simple logical reason from the Buddhist perspective, psychologically, is because they're misconceptions. So to understand how anger is a misconception, it sounds like a joke, doesn't it? What do you mean a misconception? There's a person shouting and yelling, completely having a panic attack, and you say they've got a misconception. It just sounds too weird. But this is what we have to really understand in the Buddhist psychological model about these unhappy states of mind. So typically when you look at, you read the teachings and you're practicing and you hear this term, the afflictions, all the time. That's the word they use in Buddhist psychology, afflictions. Well, we know affliction means a problem, an illness. So what kind of afflictions? Mental ones. That's the term the Buddhism uses. The Tibetans have translated, and that's the term they consistently use. So that's indicating the unhappy quality of anger and attachment and jealousy and depression and despair and arrogance and low self-esteem. The unhappiness of them, the pain of them. Unfortunately, even that we can't really get in touch with. We know they're painful, but we're so fixated on pointing the finger to the thing, the event, the person, the politician that caused it. We can't quite deal with it because we think, I've got this because they did that. So if we're really trying to look at our minds, we're trying to identify that affliction, hear it, what it's saying, because It's got the emotional component, and this is what I'm going to get to now. Why is there this intense emotional component? If all this attachment and anger and all the rest are misconceptions, this is the key thing in Buddhist psychology. They are misconceptions. You see, the way they talk about the mental consciousness, we have sensory consciousness, which is the part of our mind that functions through the medium of the eyes, the ears, and we have these cognitions of shape and color and sound. But then we've got the mental consciousness, which, as Lama Zopa says, is where the workshop is. And that's where all the thoughts and feelings and emotions and dramas. I mean, we know there's even in modern psychology, we say there's like 1,000 thoughts a second, you know? Thoughts, concepts, thoughts. So some of them we can see, you know, if you wrote down, even though, let's just say you see a person who's really angry, shouting and yelling, and you recorded what they're saying, what's coming out their mouth. And you'd have a piece of paper with very irrational, unfinished sentences, wouldn't you? And even a person who doesn't hear the person shouting, you go, wow, this person's angry. You this and you that, and there's, you know, it's a completely irrational. But and this is the key point. The person shouting and yelling, you see this bodily behavior. You hear this loud noise, but what is coming out of the mouth is words. And what are words except thoughts? They're just, and so, you know, if you see the piece of paper, there's no shouting, but you read the words, and that's thoughts. So this is the whole point, to try and see, and whether it's love or compassion or anger or arrogance, which are emotional, have all got this emotional component, but that's just the physical body involved, you know. And this is the point I'm getting to, because they're habits. They're totally instinctive habits, you know. I mean, my mother didn't have to teach me to be angry. I came into this life, this is where the reincarnation concept comes in, at least as an explanation. I brought it with me, with my mind. In other words, these misconceptions, okay, when you study Lorig, the text that describes the way the mind works, the different states of mind, okay, I'm sorry, back to the other. We've got sensory consciousness. I got scattered. We've got sensory consciousness, and then we have mental consciousness, which is where all the thoughts and feelings and emotions are. And that's the level we live at. As Lama Zopa says, that's where the workshop is. That's where the chaos is. That's where the good qualities, the rubbish ones, the fears, the dramas, you know, or even all the intellectual stories, all of that's in our mental consciousness. So we've got subtler levels of mental consciousness, which we never access. That's where if we get shamatha, get calm abiding, then that's when we've calmed all this garbage down, and we've tasted this subtler, radiant level of our mind, which is completely blissful. I mean, we don't posit such things in modern psychology, but this is Buddha's expertise, you know. So we live at this very gross level, which is conceptuality. And some of those concepts, that's what I'm saying, have this massive emotional component. Massive, because they're the voices of ego. Got this tremendous vested interest in maintaining this fear-based, panic-stricken sense of self. That's their main job. Attachment, anger, pride, they're all rooted in being voices that maintain this fear-based sense of self, you know. So why fear then? Okay, so the simple reason is because they're misconceptions. Anger, attachment, jealousy, low self-esteem, the root delusion, ego grasping, they are all literally misconceptions. So attachment is defined as a thought, starts with a thought that exaggerates the deliciousness of something. Aversion is a thought that exaggerates the ugliness of something. All the delusions all have this particular function of distorting, exaggerating, embellishing. Arrogance exaggerates your importance. Low self-esteem exaggerates your lack of importance, you know. They've all got that function. So then in that sense, they're literally misconceptions. So why they've got the fear energy is because they're misconceptions. And we're believing in these misconceptions for countless lifetimes, Buddha says, and they're totally habitual. So it's a little bit like you've got a $50 note, but you're absolutely convinced it's 500. You've always seen it as 500, to the point that when you look at that note, you actually see 2 zeros. I mean, it's a simple example, but it's my point. So this is attachment energy. So there's emotional hunger, not having enough. Then you notice the 500, you're so excited, you've got this $500 note. And so naturally, you have this massive expectation of what you're going to get for it, your $500 worth. You go to spend it, and what do you think is going to happen? Bitter disappointment because you only get $50 worth. So that's really an example. Attachment over-exaggerates the value of that cake, over-exaggerates the deliciousness of that divine new boyfriend. It paints the whole person with the one brush of divineness. You're blind as a bat. You can't see anything wrong. It exaggerates. And we know this. We know this emotion. We know this experience. But we've habitually practiced it, Buddha would say, for countless eons. In the Four Noble Truths, he says attachment effectively is the main cause of all suffering, you know. So it's extremely hard to see this because we don't even have this as a definition in our psychological models. You don't go to your, you don't say, oh, I go to your therapist, I've got attachment. Well, they'll say, that's good, you must love somebody, you know. They have a very different definition. But these are habits from countless lifetimes, Buddha says, and we come into this life totally, literally programmed, which means instinctive, automatic. So the millisecond as a kid, my attachment didn't get what it wanted, which drives us. We don't articulate it like that. Then my aversion had a panic attack. I get angry and shout and yell, you know. So aversion is the bare bones state of mind. That's what arises when attachment is thwarted. And we go between these two 1,000 times a day. So depending on your personality, it would express itself as anger, shout and yell, or maybe you're a quiet person. So it expresses itself as irritation, upset, annoyed, or anxious, worried. And of course, because it's quiet, you don't notice it until the wheels fall off, until you're 65 and you start having panic attacks because you haven't dealt with your mind. You've suppressed it. How most of us are, we don't notice what's happening in our mind until the body feels it and it's emotional, you know. We know that. And our tragedy, I think, in our modern psychological approach, we wait till the wheels fall off before you go to a therapist. We don't have maintenance. And it sounds so silly. We have maintenance for cars and houses and gardens and bodies, not for our thoughts and feelings and emotions. If you get annoyed one day because your hubby's slurping his coffee, you go to your therapist, can I have some preventative methods, please? She'll laugh at you and tell you to shut up and go home and come back when you want to kill him. I mean, I'm a bit sarcastic, but hear my point. Because we don't even listen. We don't think, oh, it doesn't matter, I'm just irritated, that's normal. No, that's the beginning of anger. And then to do it again often enough, one day there'll be the straw that breaks the camel's back, like my friend when she's 65, you know, thinking she's laid back and relaxed. So all these emotional things, these unhappy emotions, which, as I said, we give equal status to, along with kindness and love and compassion and intelligence, as being a normal part of a normal person, and in a sense that's right. But Buddha's got this radical view from his own experience that these states of mind are not at the core of our being and can be removed. I mean, this is quite a shocking concept. You know, you go to a neuroscientist and say, please give me a method to get rid of all anger, all ego, all fears. That's abnormal. You'd be cutting your pieces of brain out, you know, you can't do that. So these unhappy states of mind, they're rooted in being rooted in misconceptions. So it's only when you start to get some concentration, a little bit of taste of concentration from your meditation, that you can start to hear the conceptual stories, the script in your head, that normally we don't hear until we can feel the body shaking. And then we can't even hear the thoughts, we can just feel the pain, you know. But they're all rooted in fear. I mean, look at us, look at the world. Person's angry, look at what a person who's angry will do. Freak out, kill people, rape, murder, terrorize. I mean, talk about fear. It's not trying, you see, the thing is, if we say, oh, the poor person's got fear, we then think, oh, the poor person's having a panic attack, pat him on the head and say, it's all right, dear. No. In other words, if a person's angry, it's having a panic attack, but we tend to feel sorry for a person having a panic attack, but not for anger, you know. But psychologically, it's clear. It's obvious a person's having they're completely having a meltdown. It's called anger, because they just can't cope with that thing, which is what their attachment doesn't want. This kind of sounds brutal, but it's an eye-opener when we can hear it like this, you know. And they're mainly because it's habit, instinct, everything, you know, we call instinct, you know, you come into this life with certain habits. Oh, that's just instinct. Animals have instinct. Well, they have just habits from having done and thought these things that often in countless lifetimes, whether it's being good at piano, like these little 6-year-olds you watch on YouTube who can play Bach and Mozart. It's habit, you know, or another kid who wants to kill somebody, it's habit. Lie, it's habit. Emotion, habit. Anger, depression, anxiety, attachment, they're habits, they're habits. And this is why, because they're habitual, we take them as a given. Oh, this is me, you know, it's so tragic. Is this making sense? Can you hear it? It's kind of an eye-opener to think this way. So we all should have such compassion for ourselves, because we should be sick of this suffering. I mean, that's the whole first level of practice in Buddhism. It sounds kind of punitive. They have this kind of punitive way of talking. Attachment, anger, they cause you suffering, give them up, you know. It sounds kind of forbidding. But really it's what we would call self-compassion. Knowing yourself, controlling your body, controlling your speech, controlling your mind, because that's the stuff that causes you pain. But it's hard for us to get to this because we take it as blaming us and we can't hear it properly, you know. So it takes courage to see our own minds. And of course, these habits are very old. When anything is instinctive, it's pretty hard to change it, but it's possible. That's the point. So we've got to be very humble with ourselves and practice one day at a time, but to try to see it like this, you know. And we can see more and more, everyone these days is having anxiety and panic attacks. Everybody. I mean, with all things we call now, we just used to be considered normal, like PTSD and the traumas. Everybody's got this. Because why? Because we don't deal with what arises in our life moment by moment by moment. We put it aside. We live in denial of it. We shove it down. We blame someone else. That's why we have PTSD. I'm not being sarcastic or even simplistic. It's true. If we can deal with what arises in our lives, we won't have trauma. We won't, and I really sincerely mean this. You know, there's always an example I use of my friend in prison, Sunny. I use it all the time as an example. Accused of murdering 2 policemen along with a husband in the 70s, hitching in Florida. She is on death row, accused of murder, totally innocent. Lost her kids. Husband's head burst into flames when they electrocuted him. Lost her parents. In a cell 23 hours a day, innocent, okay? Now, I know that a number of people I work with in prison all over the world, the commonest experience is trauma, fear, despair, hopelessness, you know, because you can't express yourself in a prison, you get thrown to a deeper prison or get killed. But this woman, Sunny, I've never failed to be amazed by her. She doesn't have particular religion. She has no particular kind of spiritual approach. She was a Jewish woman. In the 70s, a hippie. Now she's like 80-something in a wheelchair. She's out of prison now. But what I'm getting at is this. I've known her for a few years. I've heard about her story, and we met. When you meet her, she's this old 80 person, and when you read the facts of her life, she'd be a perfect example of a person who's got total trauma, total PTSD, traumatized. And even in our culture, we say you can't even change that. She's this little old lady who she hasn't got trauma because she found her own methods in her cell 23 hours a day to deal with her mind. I've never failed to be amazed by her. She said at some point, I finally realized I couldn't change anything, but they couldn't take my mind from me. And you hear people talk this way. So she decided in her own cell, 23 hours a day, she decided she had her own methods. In other words, she realized, which is exactly what Buddha's saying, and she's not a Buddhist, that you can change your mind. And that's what she discovered herself. She had this incredible, it seems to me, incredible emotional intelligence that she knew she could change her thoughts. In other words, she could change her interpretation of these nightmares. And that we mostly don't believe. We think it's set in stone and it's absolute. You know, so we live in the despair and rage and grief and loss, not realizing. I just find it so astonishing because she's not a Buddhist. She's got no particular position. She just got this intelligence. So she found her own methods. She said, I would give myself 5 minutes to be enraged, and then I would stop and go back to her little plan, you know. So she learned yoga. She taught herself. She had nothing. She had a Bible in this cell 23 hours a day for years. I mean, talk about medieval, you know. And she finally got out, and that's the irony, she kept her sanity, so she never stopped working on her freedom. Now she helps people who have been wrongly accused coming out of prison, you know. But she's this little old lady. You'd never know you'd never get any hint of any drama when you meet her. She's this nice little friendly old lady, you know, who teaches yoga from a wheelchair and gives talks here and there. You never know. You never know, because why? Because she dealt with the stuff in there on her own, in herself. So she didn't carry anything with her. That's what's possible. So, and what I want to say is this: forget Nirvana, forget realizing emptiness, forget bodhicitta, forget Buddhahood long term. Just this. If we could work with this approach that Buddha's got, which, you know, he didn't invent this. He doesn't own copyright. He's just very good at it. It's his expertise, that we can learn to know our own thoughts and feelings and emotions, which means we need some kind of practice, which means you learn to listen, not some hippie mystical thing, but to hear, not just to make all the thoughts go away, or we think of as mindfulness sometimes, make everything go away and just be all blissed out. No, be brutal and listen to the chaos in there ever more deeply and identify in all these thousands of thoughts, distinguish between the attachment voice, the anger voice, the jealousy voice, the love voice, the kind voice. There's thousands of thoughts in there. Learn to make sense of all the chaos in here and unpack and unravel it, and know the neurotic ones are not set in stone, and slowly reconfigure. This is exactly the job that Sunny did in her own way. It's not mystical, it's not religious, it's just really intense psychological work, knowing you can do it. Then, and I would say, to get all those long-term results, you'll be able to manage your life. You won't have mental breakdowns. You won't have serious panic attacks, because you're dealing with what's arising as well as you can, moment by moment by moment. Okay, the degrees to which we can do that, you've got to have single point of concentration to do that. You've got to have shamatha. But even at a regular level, you know, we could manage. We won't go out. We won't lose the plot, you know. Any questions from that? That's a summary of a... Yes, talk to me, sweetheart. A bit deeper, okay. What do you mean by deeper? What do you mean? Good, darling, go on, talk.
So the first thing is, again, you say anger is a misconception? Or do I hear you right?
Yeah, so stay right there and tell me what you think that means, because it's hard to hear it initially. Yeah. What do you think it means?
That's what I'm a bit confused about. I heard you say anger is a habit,
yes,
and a misconception.
It's a misconception, yeah.
So like I understand, I think, what you say, attachment is a misconception.
How is that a misconception? So say to me what you think these words
mean. Because attachment is something in your mind. So I'm thinking of anger. This is what I'm a bit confused about.
I'll explain. Good. It's a really perfect point. Okay, aversion is the bare bones state of mind that's beneath anger, okay? Aversion. So attachment is this energy, when you get what you want, you go towards it and get excited. If there's something you don't want, you go, ugh, I don't want. Do you understand? So very bare bones, attachment and aversion, attachment, aversion. We get those concepts. Do you understand me? So anger is just a strong expression of aversion, that's all. Milder versions of aversion are irritated, annoyed, upset. They're like this emotional response. These have got the emotional component. Do you agree with that? Definitely, you know. Attachment the same. So, okay, underneath that emotional component, what we've got to try and hear is how they're rooted in these conceptual thoughts. And then from habit of practicing, believing in the misconception, I'll explain, then you get the habit, the emotional component comes. You get the habit of it. So, okay, write down, but if we can unpack and unravel, attachment is a conceptual thought, right in its bones, that exaggerates the deliciousness of something. So the cake is a simple example. You know, you're attached to cake, which means you think about it when it's not there. You feel like you're missing it. You know, we all have this. This is the dissatisfaction is the main energy of this attachment. We've all got it. I don't have enough. Something's missing. Then you think, oh, cake. Then the mind gets excited. Then you anticipate, and you're imagining this cake. We know all this experience. And then especially if your stomach's really empty and you really love chocolate cake, when you look at that plate, we know it really looks divine. We know that. We just know that automatically. And the thing is, what attachment's doing is exaggerating its deliciousness and exaggerating its power to make you happy. So there's this massive anticipation. We have to really look into this as the experience is happening. So then we know that when you get the cake, you get the taste, and it is delicious. The pleasure does come, but attachment is still not, now is not satisfied. Oh, that's not enough. I need more. So you have another piece of cake. Then you have another piece of cake. And before you know it, we realize the excitement and happiness that comes from getting the cake. The attachment starts to get disappointed. So now after 4 pieces, there's no more pleasure left. It's all gone. It's now turned into displeasure. Aversion now arises. So if you've had 5 pieces of cake and you're completely stuffed and your same eyes look at the same cake, okay, a bit missing, but now how does it look? It looks completely ugly. We know that experience. We don't join the dots. Would you agree with this analysis? Do you agree with what I'm saying? Well, attachment was all excited in the beginning. It looked divine, and now it looks ugly. That's aversion. That's aversion. So you don't punch the cake, but if it's the boyfriend and it's really volatile and he's doing something your attachment doesn't want, you want to kill him, you know? That's strong aversion. Anger is just an emotional expression of strong aversion. Are we communicating? It's really good discussion. It's perfect. We can begin to hear this. It's a revelation. The misconception is not that the boyfriend didn't harm you. He did. He punched you in the nose. But aversion, which is the response, that when this emotional hunger doesn't get the nice things, all our attachment wants is the nice things. We can only cope with everything being nice. But we just can't cope. So that's what aversion is. So it's a misconception. In relation to the cake, there's a misconception in your mind that causes the cake to look ugly. The cake isn't ugly. When the attachment is there, that causes the cake to look divine. It isn't divine from its own side. They are both projections. One is attachment that makes it look divine, and one is aversion that makes it look disgusting. They are invalid concepts, and they pervade our mind and cause the objects out there to appear to us like that. Can you hear that analysis?
Yes, but let's say anger about injustice. Just to
No, okay, I know exactly what you mean. Still, this is the point. This is a really good point. Excellent point. As Martin Luther King said, it's good to find fault, quote unquote, be angry. Look at the injustice. Look at the racism. Look at that war. That's technically not anger. That's fact. But then you say, how can I help? Whereas if it's only anger, that's why people kill each other. It becomes outrage, how dare, smash, kill, punch. So anger exaggerates, distorts, it's a panic attack. So seeing a war is a fact. Seeing injustice, they are facts. Then you say, what can I do to help? And that's compassion. So when we say get rid of anger, our trouble is we throw the baby out with the bathwater and think it means, oh, it doesn't matter, there's a war in Ukraine, that's okay, I mustn't be angry. No, you've thrown the baby out with the bathwater. So it's right, do you see? So the anger, when you're really mad at a person, you really do want to kill them. That's anger. He might have harmed you, that's a fact. So that's the part that's really hard. Or even something as simple as you stub your toe, a small event like that. That's a physical pain, it's a fact. But the next second we get angry with it. And we assume they're the same thing. They are different states of mind. So this really demands a lot of inner work. Do you hear what I'm saying? So at the same time, attachment is this emotional projection of our own lack of something that we dump onto the cake, and then are disappointed. Whereas if you haven't got much attachment, you'd have actually more pleasure. You'd even have more pleasure. You'd see it for what it is. It's the best cake on the planet, and you taste it, and the pleasure is delicious. Pleasure isn't attachment. Attachment is over-exaggerated emotional response. Anger is an over-exaggerated emotional response. So this really demands a lot of clarity, not just to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Do you understand what I'm saying here? No, I think we're communicating. It demands a lot of inner awareness to distinguish, you know. And to see that it's not a moralistic issue, it's a practical one. Because strong neurotic emotions make us go insane and then make a disaster. Do you understand? So be as strong as you like, out there, demonstrate every damn day. But it'll come from, that's why I love I mean, initially, I know when I was back in an old radical lefty back in the 60s and 70s, I preferred Malcolm X. I love Malcolm X. He's an amazing human being. And he was like really radical. And I thought Martin Luther King was pathetic. I mean, who the hell am I to talk, you know? But now when I appreciate him, his incredible courage, that man, he never gave up, you know? And he was not angry. He showed peace and clarity and reasonableness. He was such an example. Do you understand my point? So to see injustice is compassion, not anger. But we go mad, we can't cope. That's when the anger comes in. Or depressed and we want to kill ourselves. So this is hard work. And it's really quite precise. We tend to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Like when we hear that Buddha says you've got to give up attachment, we go, oh, I've got to give up my love. I've got to give up my heart. No. This is neurotic overlays. This is the point here. It's hard work, intense, and it's not moralistic. Oh, I shouldn't be angry. No, not that. I don't want to be miserable. These are the cause of our pain. We go crazy. Do you understand, sweetheart? Thank you so much. It's a really vital point, and this is really this is the essence of the Buddhist approach. We've got to dig deep into it to hear it, you know. But it takes time because our habits are so deep and have no false expectations of how long it takes. But it's a gradual process, you know. And because of that, that's what the fear is. When you've really got a strong, clearer mind, you don't get fear. You don't have fear. You see it, you see it for what it is, and you do what you can, but you don't give up. You do what you can. When we have strong attachment, you want everything to be lovely. And if it's not lovely, then you literally can't cope. Whereas if you have less attachment and you see things for what they are, which is awful, you do what you can. You won't despair. You will do a little bit at a time, you know, what you can to help. When we've got strong attachment, that's when we simply can't cope with the way the world is, which is why we bury our heads or we kill ourselves or we kill somebody. You understand? Are we communicating, people? Anybody
So
online?
if I may, just to clarify then, part of the
Who's
work.
talking? I can't hear
Oh,
you.
I'm sorry.
Yes,
Hi there.
talk.
Thank
Yes.
you so much.
Go.
Part of the work then within ourselves is understanding what is an attachment versus what is a fact. You know, so for example, the war, it's a fact. I'm angry that people are getting killed and now I'm going to do something about it. Versus an attachment to, as you said, money or love or the relationship or the hubby or whatever.
Right.
And so the work is for us internally to understand that.
The thing is that when it comes to people, we need to distinguish between attachment and love. So in the Buddhist model of the mind, and it seems almost too simple, but it's interesting. There are thousands of thoughts and feelings and emotions in here, and they've got a very clear presentation of it. And there's only three categories. The two key ones are the neurotic, deluded, I-based, fear-based ones. We know the words: attachment, anger, jealousy, despair, low self-esteem. We know all those, okay? And they're all in that first lot, the unhappy, neurotic ones. Then you've got the positive ones: love and compassion and kindness and reasonableness, okay? So love is defined as, starts with the thought, may you be happy. It's a delight in someone else's happiness. All the other ones are necessarily I-based and freaked out. The virtuous ones are other-based and reasonable. Do you understand? And they're the source of my happiness and my ability to help others. The neuroses are the source of my pain and the cause of why I harm others. We analyze it, we're going to see. So love is, so I'll say, I love, you know, Fred, my boyfriend. I love Fred. So when we say that now, what we mean is, at the beginning, especially when you're in love with him, it's 99% attachment. He appears the most divine thing since sliced bread, you know. You can't believe the divineness. Just saying his name makes you faint with pleasure. We know this, and it's very delicious. So it seems kind of cruel to say, I've got to give that up. You don't give up the pleasure. Pleasure is not attachment. Pleasure is just called a happy mind. That's marvelous. The more pleasure, the better, dear. But the trouble is, we think pleasure comes only when you get the object of attachment, you know, and then you're disappointed because you exaggerate it. So attachment exaggerates Fred's beauty, his divineness. You can't see anything wrong, which sounds like a good quality, but you're blind. You've totally got a fantasy of the person. And then it does trigger pleasure, which is great. But then love, but love is a virtue, and it's a sense of connectedness, and it's a wish that he be happy, and may you be happy. And then compassion is may you not suffer. They are the basics of all the good ones. So love and attachment virtually for us are like, we conflate them as the one thing. And then this is the big problem. You're attached to Fred, which means you have a massive You know, there's a massive vested interest in being kind to him, wanting him to be happy because he loves you and wants you to be happy. So we're kind of like propping each other up in this neurotic relationship. So the moment attachment doesn't get what it wants, when he doesn't look at you perfectly, when he farts at night instead of in the bathroom, he farts in the bed. I'm just talking simple things. He slurps his coffee after familiarity. You start to get annoyed with him. So before you know it, you can't stand the sight of this ugly bloke in your bed and you chuck him out because love is gone, because attachment is gone, and now there's aversion. So love is a virtue. Love is a delight in a person's happiness. It happens to be, unfortunately, the only people we have that for are the ones we're attached to. Do you understand? Yeah. Which is why when Fred stops doing what your attachment wants, you give him up and chuck him out and get a new one. So we have to distinguish between this I-based, fear-based attachment and love. And then in any relationship that's valid, you've got to practice patience and practice forgiveness and practice kindness. That's what will make the relationship reasonable. If it's only attachment, you'll end up killing each other or chucking each other out, you know. Do you understand? But they come together and it's very hard to see the difference. And you could even argue that about a chocolate cake. You can argue perfectly reasonably. Are you Australian or New Zealand? I can't hear.
Australian.
Okay, we love our Vegemite, right? Australians love this disgusting black paste that everybody on the planet tastes and cannot believe. We love our Vegemite on our buttered toast, okay? So you could argue, because of your habit of being an Australian, you have a preference for Vegemite, okay? But attached to Vegemite would be a panic attack if you don't get it. Or an exaggerate and freaks out. Someone's taken my Vegemite, you know, whereas if you just like it, perfectly fine to prefer Vegemite, but to be attached to it is all the drama on top. Get my point here. Do you understand? That's what we have to distinguish.
Thank you.
Okay. I mean, just recently I think I heard that people's blood pressure already calms down if you're just being loving and kind, you know? I mean, this is actually the Buddhist point, totally. But I think we can prove these things, you know? And one time when I first heard all the teachings about these levels of compassion that Buddhism would assert that you can accomplish, when I first heard all this stuff, I thought it was ridiculous. These people are over the top, you know? But I remember the Dalai Lama said, if you want to help others, practice compassion. If you want to help yourself, practice compassion. We think, oh, that sounds selfish. No, come on. Look at the benefit to oneself, you know, being kind and pleasant to other people. You can not pretending, not faking, not doing it in a craven way, but it's so evident, you know, people who really are able to think of others and help others. Okay, you take care of yourself too. It clearly makes your life so worthwhile, but it's very hard to see that if you've got a tendency to be depressed and miserable and no one loves me and it's not fair. And then you hear that you've got to love other people. It sounds totally boring, you know. Oh, what about me? I want to be loved, you know. We know that. Do you understand, people? Someone else? Somebody on here? How about you, Eileen? You got some questions? Eileen always has questions. If I want to have questions, Eileen's guaranteed to have one. Come on, girl. Out with it.
Thank you. You know, everyone is different. Some people have more anger than others. You know, everyone's attachments seem to be different.
That's right.
Ways. So what you're saying is, whatever that is, that we all have come in a sense, from countless lives. Is there a particular... What
was that last phrase? What?
From countless lives, we've
okay.
got these propensities with us.
Yeah. We've all got them to one degree. If you haven't, listen, Eileen, if you haven't realized emptiness, as they say in Buddhism, you've got attachment and aversion. But the point is, if they are mitigated by the intensity and the amount or lack of your virtues. So we often don't think this way in our psychological models, but you can have a person who's kind of got a berserk mind, what we call these labels, you know, ADHD and OCD or whatever you want to call, or bipolar, whatever. They're just labels that the Buddhism has its own analysis, as intense attachment, uncontrolled thoughts, blah, blah, blah. But if you've got virtue and goodness and ethics, you'll be okay, you know. But we don't factor that in our culture. So if you've got virtues and goodness, do you understand me? And ethics, they are your saving grace. But if you've got mainly attachment and despair and misery and low self-esteem and hopelessness and no confidence, that's when you haven't got much, that's when you can't do much changing. But your virtues are our saving grace, our kindness and empathy and goodness, you know, and ethics, don't wish to lie, steal, kill, harm. Do you understand?
Yes, yes.
They're our saving grace, is the way to put it. And the Buddhist idea is we can lessen the neuroses and grow the goodness. to limitless degrees, actually. And we're all variations on a theme. And that's where the view of karma comes in. Interestingly, just to factor that in as a psychological model is sort of fascinating. The Buddha's idea is, his observation, his view, that this concept of karma is this process, is that everything we think and do and say, every being, a monkey, dogs, humans, animals, whatever, every millisecond of what we think and do and say is the process that produces the person we become. The external world, of course, plays a major role, but we think it plays the main role, and we're just this innocent victim of life, you know. But the Buddha is the exact opposite. So we've had countless lifetimes putting seeds into our mind, and from the second of conception, we start to, you know, play out the seeds in the tendencies and seeds that we have planted in our own mind. The idea of a creator in Buddhism is just not on. It's not viable. He's got his own extensive explanation. Or the idea that your mother and father give you anger and love and kindness and psychosis and being good at music or football, not for the Buddha. You bring these stuff with you. So this is a radical point anyway for a Buddhist who takes this on board seriously, because then you're able to own responsibility for what you are, rather than thinking, I didn't ask to get born, it's not my fault. This is a huge one, you know, in the Buddhist view. So we all come into this life programmed with this and that, and you can see this. You know, this is why in the end also you can have compassion for people who are really demented, really crazy. I mean, there must have been heavy duty. And you come into this life, you're completely overwhelmed. You want to kill, steal, lie, torture. We can't explain why. Mummy didn't teach them. We have no idea why it comes. You know it can't come from God if you're a Christian or a Muslim. God doesn't give you good, bad stuff. So we're very puzzled by it. Buddhism would say it's negative tendencies in that person's mind. So when you know your own negative tendencies, even though they're mild, and you can kind of know you can change, then you can have some compassion for others, you know. But our trouble is when we have compassion for people, we think it means getting them off the hook. No, if you're harming other people, they're harming themselves, but, you know, put them away, help them to stop harm others. Anyway, just chatting. Are you understanding my point,
Yes,
Eileen?
I do. Thank you. Yes, very much so. Thank you.
Okay. Any more questions? Yes, sweetheart. Good done.
So it was another one that I would love you to elaborate. I believe I heard you say, if we understand emptiness, there's no fear.
Yeah. I mean, you know, are you familiar with that concept?
Well, my understanding of emptiness is interconnectedness.
That's a good point. That's a very good point. It's the flip side. Yes, there's conventional, they talk about the conventional way of presenting reality is that things are interdependent. And then the ultimate way of the flip side of that is that things lack independence, which is what emptiness refers to. So when you really deeply become familiar with that through your own first intellectual practice and then experiential practice and meditation, and have really got to that a primordial level of a realization, then you really would only be radiantly blissful, only be joyful, only have virtue. You've got more work to do to go further, but there's no longer a basis of having this neurotic, concrete sense of a separate self. There's not even a sense of other, you know. It seems quite subtle. I mean, it seems quite abstract for us in modern psychology, but that's exactly right. Then, yeah. So that's why I like to tell the story of Lama Zopa Rinpoche. Some of you might know him. He's happens to be one of my teachers, you know, known him since the 70s when I first became a Buddhist. He's a Sherpa, and he's renowned as a yogi from his past life. This is a very common talk in the Tibetan tradition. You know, he was recognized as a little boy as the reincarnation of this great Sherpa yogi who spent, you know, as a tantric yogi, meditator, and these great yogis, these great tantric yogis, have learned the methods to learn how to completely control their minds, go through the death process with total control, and literally choose their rebirth. That's exactly how they are. So they've gone, you know, so there he was, this little boy, born as a Sherpa. And since he was tiny, his sister would tell the story, she was 6 years older, that he just was a completely different kind of child, you know. He started, as soon as he could crawl, mummy would turn her back, she'd out there be chopping the wood or doing something or picking up the potatoes, and little Zopas, they find him crawling up the hill to where they know the cave of the previous Lama. He was known as the Laudo Lama, the previous meditator. And all the time he'd be disappearing, crawling up the hill. And from the time he could talk, you know, he's trudging up the hill. Come home, they'd say. He'd say, no, that is my home. So like a lot of these yogis, when they do go through the death process with control, they don't lose their memories, basically. They know exactly who they are. So he's recognized, you know, he wants to go back in the cave and carry on his job. Anyway, when he was about 8, finally the mother decided she'd have him checked up with the local Lama, and they agreed. He seemed to be the reincarnation of the Laudo Lama. There's this system they have, you know. So he showed these exceptional qualities. Anyway, when he was about 8, he was sent up the mountains further to live with an uncle in a monastery to start getting trained. He was a little monk. And he tells the story of when he first met Western people. So that, you know, the trekkers up. This is like in the mid-50s. And they call them yellow-eyed or white-haired. These white-eyed, yellow hair or something. Sounds like they're talking about Swedish people. Anyway, whatever. Whoever went to the mountains those days, maybe they were Swedes, I don't know. But he saw across the river, these very tumultuous rivers, he saw these, he was about 8. He saw these, you know, yellow-eyed people, and he wanted to meet them. So he bought his bowl of cooked potatoes, which is their gift, you know, you can't go without a gift. And he's walking on the, it's like a big log. The river wasn't so deep, but very intense, you know, the water up there, the rivers. So he's walking on and he fell in the water with his potatoes, you know. So, of course, they don't teach him how to swim up there. So he's in the tumultuous water. He's 8 years old. And he said, and this is how he told the story. He said, the head would come to the surface for air. So this is already telling us. This is the way they train. When they're talking about how to look into your mind, you're identifying the delusions. And this is a kind of objective way of observing yourself. When we're very strongly ego grasping, we go, I came up for air. You know, I am angry. They say there is anger. It's a very good method, actually. Be more objective about what's in your mind instead of this I, right? So he said the head kept coming up for air, and he saw this poor uncle having a panic attack, running along the bank, losing his boy. So then he kept going up and down in the water. And then he said, the thought occurred to me, the person known as the Laudo Lama, even that, not I, but the person known as the Laudo Lama, is about to die. And then when he told the story, he said, I didn't know anything about emptiness, meaning in that life he hadn't studied anything, but we can deduce from this experience that he'd realized emptiness in the past. And once you realize emptiness, once you've cut the root of all the neuroses, you can't go back. You can't fall back. I think Buddha says that for countless lifetimes, we've had shamatha, we've had calm abiding, we've had incredible realizations, but we haven't realized emptiness until you've cut the root of the ego grasping, which means you can't go back. You've got more work to do. So clearly that seems to be the indication that he had realized it. But he said, I knew nothing about emptiness, but there was no fear, he said. There was no fear. So I think in our culture, I always think, who was it? Mr. Darwin or somebody identified something called instinct for survival or something like that, wasn't it? Because if we observe animals, we observe humans, it's absolutely true. When we are attacked, we have a panic attack, and we call it because we need to survive. We need to have that in order to know what to do. Well, Buddha says, don't be ridiculous. That's a sign of ego grasping. So in our psychology, we don't have the possibility of not having fear. We know there are people, but it's just like that would be an exception. But this is the logic of it. So basically, he was observing what was going on, but that's what we've got to understand. Because he didn't have any ego grasping, he realized emptiness, there couldn't be fear. He's observing it, but there's nothing to grasp at, which doesn't mean that we would think if he doesn't have fear, then he's got nothing to compel him to want to go up for air. And so he just sink to the bottom of the river like a stone and go, oh, well, I'm drowning. In other words, we chucked the baby out with the bathwater. There he behaved perfectly like any person would, coming for air, but his mind would not have been berserk. This is the thing that's hard for us to hear, but this is the Buddhist point. You know, we can accomplish that, or degrees of it even. He didn't have fear. So he's observing what was going on. He was trying to go up for air, but, you know, it was a spontaneous reaction, but his mind wouldn't have been disturbed. This is the point. Are we communicating here? I mean, I find that very encouraging. I'm looking forward to that. Thank you. Do you understand me? That's why I like to always tell the story. One time I mentioned a couple of times one story, anyway, when I got held up with a gun. When I first came to New York in 1974, when I was a radical lesbian separatist feminist, my final stages of my political activity before I became a Buddhist, I'd exhausted all options of who to blame for the suffering of the world. First I was a Catholic and all the non-Catholics were the problem. Then I was a hippie, all the straight people were the problem. Then I was a communist and all the rich people were the problem. And then I was into black politics and Martin Luther King and Malcolm X and all the imperial business and race, so all the white people were the problem. Then I heard about feminism, I didn't even know the word. And the male people were the problem. I literally had exhausted all options. Anyway, there I was in New York in 1974. I came in June. The moment I arrived at the airport, I knew this is where I'd live one day. So now 50 years to the year, I live 3 minutes around the corner from where I lived then on Christopher Street. It's very strange. Anyway, so my sister and I were on the Lower East Side. We'd been to an Irish bar. This is 1974. We knew nothing about guns and the East, the Lower East Side. We knew nothing about that. We're just walking home, 2 in the morning, and Jan, my sister, happened to have her glass of wine still. She took her glass of wine from the bar, and we're walking home. And this dude comes and he puts a gun in between my breasts, right? I had this very nice Indian jacket on, I remember. And I remember I've had a lot of violence in my life, but for some reason I don't get fear. I don't know why. I don't know why. It's my nature. Don't ask me why. I don't. I get very bossy. I get very clear. And this dude, I could see straight away he was more scared than me. Straight away I could see this. And I became like his mum, He said, "Give me your money, bitch." The gun was right there. He was this close. I remember, I don't remember all the exact words, but I remember the moment. And I said, "Well, fuck you, man. Excuse me. We're as poor as you. You give me your money." I argue with him. I kind of argue with him. I'm very logical, So my sister kept saying, "Hey, brother, have some wine. I don't want your fucking wine. I want your money." This bizarre back and forth, And of course, it was confusing to the poor guy because we've got these English-sounding accents, and that throws Americans completely, Do you understand? They think you're the Queen of England or something. So in the end, I was just being, and I didn't dislike this guy. I could tell very clearly he was more scared than me. This gun right there. So all I'm getting at is this. What I realized even then, I was like 29 or 31 or something then, I can't remember, I hadn't met the Dharma yet, that when there's no fear, there's no suffering. That for me is a revelation, I swear to you. It's accidental. I didn't plan it. It's just my nature. Do you understand my point? It happened. He probably had more fear than me afterwards. More upset and twisted and annoyed and frustrated, It was my party story. I learned that from it. When there's no fear, there's no suffering. Are you communicating? I don't have trauma because I dealt with it. Okay, it's an extreme example, but it's a good example because of that. I mean, but forget about that. At the same time, I had this relationship with my older sister, who was also in New York. Since we were little, she was 1 year older than me, and she was the only person who could traumatize me. She would freak me out. I'd be in tears and unhappy because she was mean to me. So she could upset me, but not this gunman. So I'm not trying to say I'm a saint, Do you understand my point? For some reason, this violence doesn't seem to worry me. I don't know why. That's what I learned. Even then, I learned that. It blew my mind. When there's no fear, there's no suffering. Are we communicating? So we have to practice. People have to practice, that's all. Not see it as set in stone. The commonest thing we have in the world is, "Oh, you can't change trauma." It's just not true. Trauma is bad because we have attachment and anger and fears of terrible. The pain of life is unbearable. And some people cannot cope with the pain and literally do go mad. This is the logic. This is the Buddhist analysis of why. But our trouble is we hear it as blame. Because when Buddha talks about the mind and why we suffer, he doesn't talk about what your boyfriend does. He doesn't talk about what your mother did to you or the Catholic Church. He doesn't discuss that. He talks about your mind. So it's quite shocking, Anyway, are we communicating here? Are there questions? So the bottom line is we've got to learn to know our mind, people. That's all. That's the end. And the thing is that there are many misunderstandings about mindfulness, meaning it's a method to make it all go away and make you feel lovely. This is like childish, with respect. The reason to have bloody meditation is so you can hear the garbage even more clearly, and then you can own it and hear it and work with it, not be scared of it, This is our biggest problem. They say, I always quote this, but in the Pabongka Rinpoche, one of these 20th century commentators on the Lam Rim literature in the Gelugpas, he describing the 9 stages of cultivation of single-pointed concentration, very technically. And he said that the sign of success of the first of the 9 is that we think our mind is getting worse. But it's not. We know if you start to do therapy, you think you're going crazy. You can't believe your mind. You can't believe the junk that arises because we're now seeing it. So we have to have the courage to see it and be happy to see it because now we can identify the problems and now we can fix them. But we are terrified of seeing the garbage in our minds because we say, this is me. This is the worst tragedy, you know. They say, this is me because it's so habitual. This is the irony of ego, you know. We have to have such courage to want to see it, but not to identify me as that. If you want to identify with anything, your virtues are who you are. You can't lose those. When you're fully developed, the delusions have gone. But what is left is only your virtues. They are who we are at a conventional level. That's very encouraging, you know. Good. Come on, who else then? Who else has a question? Yes, Nicole, you talk to me sometime.
I have an anecdote, and I would love to hear your take on it.
Okay, good.
I had a situation. I was driving my daughter and her boyfriend, and there was a person on the street. We live in a safe town, but anyway, there was a person on the street, and he looked like he needed help. So I offered to help this person, and it was clear that. Anyway, I said, you know, no, I'm not going to give you a ride to Yonkers. And then he spit at the car.
So
And
I'm a bit confused the story.
yeah, okay. So I was trying to help someone on the street, and the guy spit at my car,
He
and
what? He what?
he spit at us.
Oh,
He
you were
spit-
trying to help him, but he spat at you.
yeah, because yes. And
Okay, fine. So what happened then? Then
so
go
then
on.
we drove off, and my daughter and her boyfriend were very upset that I tried to help this person who they thought was unsafe. And I was more scared of my daughter and her boyfriend's disappointment at me than I was of having,
There, now there you go. That's a good point. No, that's a very good point, Nicole. That's very
and
interesting.
and
No,
I
exactly.
actually my daughter said, "Can I need to talk to you." Like, she's 17 and she wanted to have a conversation with me about this, and I just ignored, and so then she came home with her boyfriend, and the two of them had a conversation about how I need to be safe, I need to do this, I need to do that. And my goal and my intention was to listen and say, maybe you're right about that, and to leave it.
I understand.
But I got
I
defensive.
understand. So
Yeah.
what's your Buddhist analysis of that? What's your what? If you want my feedback, but what's yours?
My
Mine.
my
The back of
analysis,
mine.
I ended up having about 24 hours of agita, like, because I wasn't happy with the way I respond. You know, I
I
didn't.
understand. So basically, what you're saying is that you're more agitated and upset about your daughter's disapproval than the
Yes.
dude who spat at you. Now that's a good point. Well done. That's a very good point to see. That's exactly right, because mummies have a craving for their children to love them every millisecond, and we're scared to upset them. You know, so you upset your daughter.
I want that to go away. I want to be I want to be done with all of that. Like,
That's right. Exactly.
yeah.
That's right. Very good. Well done. Good on you. What else, people? Yes, sweetheart. Go. You have a question. Come on. She had a question. She's waiting all this time. Here, this one. She's been waiting all this time patiently. Go, darling. What's your question?
Stories you've been telling have just swept my question away.
Oh, is it there still or not?
Yeah. I was wondering about, like, sometimes this anger and fear is like very, very, very unconscious and invisible.
Very what,
like,
darling?
unconscious and
Yes,
invisible.
exactly. Very
Sometimes
deeply
like
instinctive.
it seems like actually genuinely I'm at peace.
Yes.
But then you don't know what's going on
No, that's
under
right.
the surface.
Exactly. We don't. No, we don't. And I think that's the thing that, I mean, this is what these.
So that kind of scares me, and I'm
No, I
not sure
hear
how
you.
to look.
No, I
for
understand, darling. I know the Dalai Lama always says that these amazing Indians more than 3,000 years ago, who were the ones who began this investigation into the nature of self. And we've got to understand the insane sophistication and brilliance of this technique that we call the development of samadhi, the development of single-pointed concentration. The words are kind of cute, but I think there's no conception of how profound, how unbelievable our own mind is, and the levels of it that we can learn to access, and the brilliance of our mind at that level. As if, I mean, I remember Lama Yesi said, you know, that like we can, it's as if you can see you can count every atom in the universe. The bliss, they say the bliss, the rapture, the ecstasy, they're words like that we would experience, an utterly peaceful, brilliant state of mind that has literally nothing to do with what we think in neuroscience or modern psychology, with respect. We've got to realize this phenomenal potential of our human mind, meaning the levels, if we really realize once we know that's potential, the levels of literal ignorance that we live in day to day. We know the mind at the tip of the iceberg. So we know that. We can have some then long-term courage and long-term patience and not be scared of it, but have the willingness and the wish to unpack and unravel our mind and to go to this degree of brilliance. Maybe not in this life, it's okay. Any work, any level of work on it. It's quite a unique approach to the mind, do you understand? Do you understand me? But not to be scared of it, darling. Not be scared of it, otherwise it'll just make it worse. But know you've got potential to be more virtuous, more clear, more wise, and therefore more happy, and therefore more empathetic and compassionate. So see it in a positive way. But it's true that even just getting that samadhi is something inconceivable in our world of psychology, you know, inconceivable. It's just why we think it's just fantasy, you know, but it's not. It's brilliant psychology. Do you understand me? It's good to know this. Or even, you know, the levels. Once you've accessed that level of mind, they say you get what they call clairvoyance. Now that for us is a hippy, trippy, weird, wacky thing, you know. Maybe you've kind of remembered that you were a 14th century princess or something once. But this level of clairvoyance is crystal clear because you've accessed a level of mind that isn't conceptual and isn't sensory. It's a level we don't posit, basically. And so the mind at that subtle level can therefore cognize far more subtle phenomena, including the minds of others, including long distance, including the past, and including the future. It's all there in the literature. It has been for 3,000 years. But in our arrogance, in the Greco-Roman, you know, Christian, Judaic system, we just think it's wacky and weird, you know. What do we know about India or Africa for that matter? But now, with the Dalai Lama coming in around the last 40, 50 years, all these discussions with the best brains in our culture, we're beginning to appreciate this incredible knowledge that's been around about the mind for 3,000 plus years. Are we communicating? I mean, we actually think it was Freud 100 bloody years ago, you know. I mean, how rude we are, how arrogant we are, you know, in my opinion. Do you understand me? So just realizing the phenomenal potential of our mind should be encouraging to us. Do you understand me? That we can learn to know our mind, but one step at a time, sweetheart. So I remember even one time, you know, the level of knowledge of these great yogis who've accomplished all this. Lama Zopa said one time, for example, and this is very shocking to us, they talk about the suffering of animals, their minds, you know. So we do not see suffering in animals unless they're eating each other. And even then we just call it nature, you know. So he said, if you just for a moment could have a direct insight into the mind of your cute little dog, the mental suffering, meaning the primordial ignorance, would be so appalling, you'd never want to waste a second of this precious human life. That is not how we think. So that's either he's made up a stupid story or he's got some level of wisdom that can see the human mind, see the dog's minds. And that's the level of capability we have got to see our own mind in a subtle, subtle way, and therefore the capability to see the minds of others. This is the Buddhist approach. Do you understand? I mean, I find that very encouraging, very amazing, actually. Are we communicating? So have confidence. Just apply the methods, that's all. And be eager to learn about your mind. Do not be scared of it. And that is one of our things. And that's fear, basic, gross fear. We're terrified of our minds.
That's what I feel like. I feel like I'm happy with my compassion and my loving kindness. And
I see, yeah.
Sort of it keeps
I know.
going.
No, don't be, darling.
Yeah.
Be happy to look into it. It's like you look at your garden, and as long as you see pretty flowers, you feel okay. But as soon as you see the sign of a weed, you don't want to look at it. You've got to learn to know the weeds, baby, so you can pull them out and then get more flowers. So have courage. Have courage. This is a typical fear, especially, yeah. I mean, we've got our own way of expressing fears, you know. So I'm kind of berserk in a way. I mean, the fact that I say I'm not scared of violence is true. All my life, I'm not scared. This is true. I don't know why. So I'm kind of berserk. And so even when there were fights and dramas in our family, all my sisters were terrified. They'd try to pull me back because I would never give up fighting. And my father's going to murder me. And they'd say, Robina, Robina, stop, stop. And they'd be living in fear and panic. And I wouldn't fear and panic. I just go, get up there. Okay, come on. Do you understand me? So I've got other fears, but don't be scared of what's inside. Be happy to find it. Have some courage. It's okay. It's okay. You can, you know, it's the fear of it that causes suffering, not the thing itself. That's a fact. Do you understand me? I'm not saying I'm so clever. I'm just giving different kind of personalities, you know. Do you understand me? I mean, different, like for example, one friend, doesn't matter, I shouldn't talk about my family. My family always ask me not to talk about them because then it's on YouTube and things and I have to be careful, you know. But it's somebody I know has incredible fears and so many things trigger her fears and she's lost memory of years, you understand? But in my approach, we discussed it. My approach was I'd look into it. I'd walk into the middle of the fight where she'd try to have a panic attack and control the fight and panic about it. Do you understand? So there's different ways our delusions function. At least you don't harm others. I harmed others. Do you understand me? But we have to learn to be more courageous about our own minds and not be scared. Okay, get friends and support and therapists, whatever you like. But ordinary fears like this are very common. We can't cope with a thing that we call it a trigger, you know, because you can't guarantee it's not going to happen. That's the thing. It's not being depressing. Have courage. And continually identify yourself with your good qualities, then you will keep having courage. And because they are stronger and more powerful than your neuroses, you know. Don't worry about it. Do you understand? Yes. Go on. And this lady, go on. Yes, sweetheart. Talk to me.
Thank you again, Venerable.
Good.
Rabina, nice to see you again.
Yes.
So I heard you say at the very beginning tonight that you gave a list of virtues and you said forgiveness is hard work. You were describing virtues and forgiveness was one of them. And then you said very quickly, it's hard work. And so I was just wondering if you could talk about that more.
Forgiveness.
Yes. I assume anger is the reason why it becomes hard to
Yes.
forgive.
No,
and
very
so
much.
then we go
Definitely.
back up to the anger
Absolutely.
and
No, it's very, very, very. Let's just do a bit of analysis on that one. Okay, that's a good idea. Good point. Well, first of all, I want to give you a bit of background to it. I think why forgiveness is so huge in the way we talk in our culture. Because if you look into the Buddhist psychological model and they talk about the virtues, they don't use the word forgiveness much. And I'll explain my thinking. So here we've come from a Christian background, I presume. I was a Christian, maybe you're Jewish or Christian, but both the same principle that there's a creator there. There's a boss who made us, who makes the world, who is the boss, and I'm speaking very simply, who punishes and rewards. And of course, certainly if you're a Catholic, I know from learning from my Catholic priest friend, that a sin by definition is doing what God said not to do. Now that's great if you have faith in a creator, but what I'm getting at is, for the Buddha, a negative action is a natural law. Killing is wrong because people don't like getting killed. For Christians, it's wrong because God said. And that's a pretty powerful concept. So obvious, and then the point I'm getting at is, you have to confess to God. You must because he's the boss. And then his forgiveness is what purifies you. You get my point here? Forgiveness is the Christian view of what makes you pure. You have to have someone's forgiveness. Are you with me so far? So I think we bring that into our world. So if you and I are friends and I've harmed you, I will beg you to forgive me. I will. And if you don't, I will feel devastated and I will feel like I can't be healed until you've forgiven me. I'm just using some simple talks first. So the Buddhist approach is, you could forgive me and you might, but if I don't, let's say I am mean to you, let's say I'm mean to you and I keep being mean to you every day, like saying you're my sister, and and then I feel all guilty and I ring you back, oh, I'm so sorry, Mary, please forgive me, and you know that you want me to love you, so you say, I forgive you, Robina. But if you're really wise, you'd say, I am forgiving you, Robina, but you've got to decide to change. So forgiveness is not enough. So the Buddhist approach is, when you do the purification practices, you learn first to regret what you've done is wrong. I have to own that myself, not wait to be forgiven. And then I have to say, I regret having lied to pretend you're Mary. What's your name? Elizabeth. I have to first regret, it's true, Robina, you are unkind to Elizabeth, but I want to regret that for my own sake first. It's like forgiving myself because it's an old habit and I don't want to do it again because I'm sick of the pain it causes me. The next step is now I'll have compassion for Elizabeth and know how I harm her. And the next step is I will then purify it by doing a practice. And the fourth step is I will vow not to do it again. Okay, that's the process. So forgiveness wouldn't even come into it. And me, I have to heal it. I'm suffering from it, from myself. Then I cause you suffering. And if you do forgive me or don't, in a sense, let's say you don't forgive me. Let's say you're mean and nasty and won't forgive me because I really did harm you. Still, I could purify it and it would be sad for me, but I wouldn't define myself as unhealed until you've healed. I would know it's me who has to do the work. And if I've got a healthy relationship with you, I would love you to forgive me, but I'd have to promise to change. It's not enough just to be forgiven. So I'm just saying that as a background now. So now. So the Buddha's approach would be, if say you've harmed me, in the second step where we have compassion for the people we've harmed, we would also have compassion for the people who've harmed us. So if Elizabeth really harmed me, if I'm brave enough, and you've got to wait till you're ready for that point, I would have compassion for Elizabeth. Why? Because Elizabeth harming me, she's harming herself. The key thing about karma is we harm ourselves. So I first have to have regret because it's like compassion for myself because I'm harming myself by being mean to you. And then I have compassion for Elizabeth who's harming me because she's harming herself. And then, so if you can't do that, then of course, you could then argue, of course, if I can have compassion for you, it goes without saying I'm forgiving you. Because I've got to realize that people who harm are harming themselves. That's the basic thing in karma. And if you know that for yourself, it's easy to do it for the other person. You with me? So if we can't forgive a person, so the Buddhist analysis of karma would be that you know that you must have harmed them in the past. That's the absolute basis here. So then it would be easy to forgive them. You'd have compassion for them and easily forgive them. It would be just goes without saying. But the compassion is the point you're focusing on because you harm yourself. So if you can't forgive, it's because you still blame that person for making you miserable. That's the point. And this is very true, I mean, many times. And it's not an easy thing, because to actually own responsibility from the karmic perspective, that you and I are in this tennis match together, this karmic history together. I'm harming you, you're harming me, I've harmed you, you harm me. And if we take that on board, then we're kind of like equal participants in it. I'm not just some innocent victim. Without karma, it's hard to not be an innocent victim. But if you're in it together karmically, then I've got to do my bit. Do you understand what I'm saying? That's the approach.
I mean,
go on.
Is it always?
Yes, very.
Is it just that you harm?
No, I mean, the Buddha's view is really that karma is this totally natural law, that it's a natural law. Okay, we know that botany is a natural law. Would you agree with that? And no matter whether you know botany or not, it's doing its job, isn't it? And everything that grows, we know the logic has to come from a seed, and it's knowable, it's coherent, and it's consistent. Do you understand? We know that's what natural law means. Well, Buddha has identified that karma is a natural law. It's not punishment, it's not reward, there's no boss, no one runs it. Minds, every being's mind in the universe is running within the law of cause and effect. And everything we experience is only the fruit of what we've done. Every person we meet and how they treat us can only be the result of what we've done. It can't be random, it's just not possible. So all the good as well, of course. Do you understand? All the good as well. We forget about the good. We only think about the bad, you know. In other words, we don't care why we only wonder why the weeds are there. We never ask why the flowers are there, but the law of botany applies to both. So the law of karma applies to good things. I joke, and it's true, I never yet had a person ask me the question, why do good things happen? It's only the bad. We kind of fixated on the bad, you know. Do you understand? It's very fascinating. But are you clear about what I was saying, the approach of forgiveness? And so really you could argue the first step is to forgive yourself. That's what regret is. Regret is owning the fact that you did it, because it's habit. I did this, Robina, because I've got angry mind. It's just my old habit, sweetheart. It's okay. And I'm sick of the suffering. I have to have that step first. I've got to be kind. Regretting my own anger, it has to be kindness to myself because I am sick of the habit. Then I can have compassion for you. And if it also means having compassion for you if you've harmed me, because I'm able to confess and forgive myself, I can easily forgive you as well. Do you understand me? Yeah. Got to unpack this stuff. It's kind of, you know, it's layers and layers and layers, isn't it? Yes, sweetheart.
One thing it helped me to unpack. It does not mean that if someone harms you, that your compassion, me take a step back. Your compassion is also not enabling that the harm keeps being done over and over and over.
No, that's right. No, because I think when we say, keep the microphone, when we say we have compassion for somebody, it's usually we feel sorry for the person. So that's why we can have compassion for people who are suffering and sick and poor, but we do not have compassion for pedophiles. We do not have compassion for torturers. We don't have compassion for bad people. We want to hate them. Do you understand? But when we understand karma, having compassion for someone, your heart breaks because you see they're harming themselves. You'd put them in prison for sure because you don't want them to harm themselves, and that's why they harm others. So that's a really crucial point. You understand what I'm saying? So it doesn't mean you're enabling, no. Our compassion is a bit sentimental. I always think of a pedophile. Nobody has compassion for a pedophile except his mum, because she can see he's harming himself. That's the first step in Buddhism. You've got to see that you're harming yourself by your own neuroses. Then on the basis of this is why you harm others. And that's why they say, when you really know this for yourself, it is not difficult to have compassion for the murderers and the pedophiles, but it's not sentimental, because they are harming themselves, not just now, but for the future, because they're creating a nightmare of future, you know. Do you understand? It's a huge one, really. That's why I always, again, tell that story. Maybe it's time to finish on this story, yeah. I've told this story so many times. I have to get new stories. I'm so sorry. Say the same ones again and again. In 2003, when I was living in San Francisco, working with the prison project, and Richard Gere invited some former prisoners. We had a meeting. We're going to collaborate on a few things. Anyway, he had this meeting, His Holiness, 2003, and he invited 20 former prisoners, all of whom had done some kind of meditation in prison. It was a very wonderful day. They met His Holiness. They were blissed out, all these guys, you know, these people, men and women, male and female, Puerto Rican, black and white, male, female, a whole cross-section of American people in prison. It was a wonderful day. And he also invited 2 young Tibetan nuns who'd been tortured and sexually abused in prison. So for me, I find this such a powerful example of the whole Buddhist approach of karma and of anger and attachment, okay? So these young women, it was very evident, if you wanted to argue, you could argue that their suffering was probably quantitatively more or qualitatively worse than everybody else's. You could argue that. But it was very evident to everybody that they weren't angry. And I've got to explain this. This is really the point. Anger, you analyze what anger is saying. The panic of anger is so unbearable. How dare you do that to me? I don't deserve it. Would you agree with that? That's exactly what anger feels. And I'm not criticizing. This is the philosophy of anger, and this is the view of samsara, and this is everybody's got this, because we feel like we're an innocent victim. We feel like we didn't ask to get born. Mummy and daddy made me. God made me. There's no view, except in the Buddhist view and the Hindu one, that you create yourself, that you bring yourself into this life. No wonder we feel like innocent victims. No wonder we have pain, because we don't believe we deserve it. And it's true, you didn't do anything wrong in this life. So we go mad when we are pain. This is the worst pain in the planet, when you're harmed by somebody when you didn't do anything to deserve it in this life. I agree, completely, like a nightmare. Well, these young women have been in, you know, Tibet has had the view of Dharma, the view of karma, in their bones as a culture. 99% of Tibetans were Buddhists, a couple of Muslims in Lhasa, you know. All the Catholics went there in the Middle Ages and even translated the Bible. They couldn't get one Tibetan, so they gave up, you know. Anyway, this view of karma coming from India was completely in their bones. It's like we take as a given neuroscience and the materialist view, right? Besides the Christian view, right? And the Jewish one. We take it as a given as truth. That's in our bones. What's in their bones since they're born over 1,200 years in their culture is the view of karma. It's natural for them. Do you see my point? It's their view of the universe. Nothing surprising. So they're brought up with this. It's integrated utterly into their practice, you know? That's why, of course, they were probably suffering. Who wants to get raped and attacked? Nobody. But they had a way of understanding it, meaning they won't have that powerful, nightmarish experience of why is this happening to me? The same time as I heard about Sonny, I remember the same time reading about this other guy also innocent, in a prison, who was normal, who went mad, screaming daily, I did not rape and kill that woman. I did not rape and kill that woman. That's natural if you have the view you don't know why you're asked to get born, you don't know why this is happening, you have no logical reason, and no wonder we go mad in our culture. No wonder we're having a panic attack every day. There's these young women, they don't have that view. You've got to see this. It's in their bones. So they're dealing with their suffering every moment by comprehending it, understanding it, trying to work with it. And as one of them said at the end, with tears. And of course, she said, we had compassion for our torturers because we know we must have harmed them in the past. So this is back to your question. If you have a person, you have some people in life you adore, Elizabeth, and the energy between you is divine, isn't it? You adore each other, you love each other like ancient friends. That's the intensity of your karmic connection of goodness together. Well, just get the bad ones. It's exactly the same. The intensity of the karma between us, it draws us together. No one's pulling the strings here. We create this ourselves. The energy, we bring ourselves together again, and the same garbage happens. And we don't even know why we hate each other. We don't even know why people harm us or hate us so much, you know? The intensity of our past energy, and same with the goodness. So these young women have that view. They have able to comprehend it, and therefore, as she said, and we had compassion because we know we'd harmed them in the past, and because we know they will suffer unbearably in the future because of this. They say the bodhisattvas have such compassion for us, for the world, because we don't realize, forget realizing emptiness, forget bodhicitta, because we don't realize cause and effect, that we are the source of our own happiness and own suffering, you know. It's a huge one, really, but it's a real shit. You've got to make this effort to change the whole philosophical construct. If you even and of course, we're not clairvoyant, so you can't prove it immediately. So you've got to take it as your view. And I mean, many people who like Buddhism don't like karma. Even many people, Tibetan Buddhists, where they really go into it, don't even think about it. We don't even understand it. So no one, we suffer so badly, we can't get far. This is a huge view that if you can change it, permeates your whole view. It's just exactly the same as having a view like if you're a really devoted Muslim or Christian. I remember Lama Yeshe saying if we had the faith of Muslims, we'd all be Buddhas by now. They have total faith in God, God's will. Everything is God's will. And they have confidence in that. And they don't need to know God's will. They know he has a plan. You'll lead a very happy life. And I'm not criticizing. It's a profound view if that's your view. It is not Buddha's view, that's for sure. All right, people, finish with that one. I know when I first heard the teachings, for me, karma, what I'd been missing in my life. I love the view of karma. That explains so much. And I think I would joke about it, but it put me in control, and because I love being a boss. It means you are the boss when you karma. You created yourself, baby, so you can change yourself. It completely stops the victim mentality, I promise. I love the view of karma. You can see, can't you? So have some enthusiasm, but you've got to think it through. Not just go, oh, there's a garden out there. What is it? Oh, that's botany. Can you explain it? No. You better learn a little botany, then you can use the laws. Same with karma, okay? A few basics about it. Then you can work with it in your own life. But it takes massive work, I tell you, because it's utterly not in our bones. The view of ego is in our bones. Poor me, innocent me, not fair me. I don't deserve it, you know. Well, attachment is I deserve good things, and anger is I don't deserve bad things. That's why they're so traumatized. That's why they're rooted in fear. You with me, people? Okay, that'll do. Thank you, people. Goodbye, everybody. Hello, Buck. I haven't seen you before. Where are you from, Buck? Where are you based?
I'm in Oregon.
Oregon.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Close to Portland.
A what?
Close to Portland, Oregon.
Oh, good, very good. Well done. I'm happy to see you. Happy to see you, Buck.
Thank you.
Okay, people. So that'll do for now, I think. Enough food for thought. Take it on board, even if you only remember 1% of it. Try and put it into practice. Have courage. As my friend who's a therapist and a student of the Lamas says, we need to put our hands in our own shit. You can't just relax on your rest on your laurels. You've got to discover the stuff that's holding you back, you know. Not out of depression or fear, but be delighted to see it. Don't exaggerate it, but own it, you know. It's very powerful. Thank you, people. Jang Trub Sem Chog, Rinpoche Ma Ke Panam Ke Gu Chig, Ke Panyam Pa Me Pa Yang, Gong Ne Gong Du Pewa Sho, Gewa Di Nudu Dag, Lama Sange Drub Gyu Ne, Droa Chikyang Malu Pa, Dei Sala Gopa Shog. Be happy. Keep going one step at a time. We're a work in progress. Have this feeling of moving forward, okay? Thank you, people. Thank you so much. Thank you, Tashi. Thank you, Zoya. Zoya. Thank you, Zoya. Okay, sweethearts, goodbye. See you all later.